The human heart is a fortress, until it isn't. Its walls aren't breached by cannon fire or siege towers, but by the quiet, insidious whisper of a single piece of paper. For Evan Brooks, the fortress had already been weathering a long, gray winter. The death of his mother 2 months prior had left a hollowed-out silence in his world, a silence his girlfriend of 3 years, Maya, had tried valiantly to fill. She had been his anchor, his port in the storm, her presence a soft light in the encroaching dark. But lately, that light had begun to flicker. It started with a distance, a chasm that wasn't there before, masked by the tired smile she'd offer when he asked if she was okay. "Work's just overwhelming," she'd sigh, the phrase becoming a mantra. Late nights at the office became the norm. Her phone, once left carelessly on the coffee table, now lived in her pocket, buzzing with a frantic, secretive energy. He'd see the name Kay flash on the screen. A colleague, she'd said once, a dismissive wave of her hand. Evan, adrift in his own grief, chose to believe the wave. To question it felt like building another storm on top of his own. Then came the evening he found it. The house was quiet. Maya was working late again. He was looking for a pen in her desk drawer, his fingers brushing against a leather-bound journal he'd never seen before. Tucked inside, like a venomous snake nestled in the grass, was a single sheet of paper, half filled with her elegant, looping script. It wasn't a journal entry. It was a letter addressed not to him, but to someone else. His eyes, against his will, devoured the words. They spoke of a loneliness he hadn't realized she felt, of a life that had become a beautiful, comfortable routine. And then, the line that stopped his heart, that turned the air in his lungs to ice. "Being with you is like remembering a color I've forgotten. You make me feel alive again." The paper trembled in his hand. The world, already muted by grief, now seemed to lose all its sound. This was the K. This was the late nights. This was the ghost haunting their home, and it had a name, written in the ink of her betrayal. A raw, animal part of him wanted to scream, to tear the letter to shreds, to call her and unleash the torrent of pain and fury. But he didn't. A strange, chilling calm settled over him, with meticulous care, as if handling a relic of a life that was already over. He folded the letter along its original creases and slid it back into the journal, back into the drawer. He closed it softly, the click of the latch sounding like a final, definitive lock on their past. The confrontation would come, but not with rage, not with tears. He would answer her silent, written betrayal with a silence of his own, a silence so profound it would roar. But first, he had to know how deep the lie went. And the only way to do that was to step back into the shadows of their life and watch as the woman he loved prepared to destroy everything they had built. In the days that followed, Evan became a ghost in his own home. He moved through the rooms with performance precision, replaying the script of their old life while the new, terrible truth hummed beneath his skin. Maya was normal. She laughed at a comedy show they watched, her hand resting on his knee. She cooked his favorite pasta, humming in the kitchen. She asked about his book deadlines, her brow furrowed with concern that now felt like a costume. Every gesture of affection was a fresh cut, every casual smile a twist of the knife. The letter echoed in the cavern of his mind, a relentless, poisonous refrain. "You make me feel alive again." He realized then that the greatest pain wasn't the discovery of the affair. It was a performance she was giving, the ease with which she inhabited the role of the loving girlfriend while her heart was elsewhere. He was living with a stranger, a brilliant actress, and he was the only audience member who knew the play was a tragedy. The urge to confront her, to shatter the delicate glass menagerie of their life, was a physical ache, but he swallowed it down. He would not give her the drama. He would not be the angry, jealous boyfriend she could use to justify her escape. His revenge would be his absence. His final word would be his silence. And so, Evan began to build his escape with the quiet focus of an architect. While Maya was at her overwhelming work, he became a phantom, dismantling his life from theirs. He took a small, furnished apartment downtown, paying the deposit from a personal account his mother had left him. He began to slowly, methodically, move his most precious belongings, his books, his writing manuscripts, the vintage typewriter that had been his father's. He visited their shared bank account and, with a cold, steady hand, withdrew exactly half of its contents, leaving a neat, clinical void where his financial presence had been. He was erasing himself line by line from the story of them. The final piece of his plan came to him one night, watching her text Kay with a small, secret smile. It was a mirror, a perfect, poetic reflection of her deceit. He would return her words to her, not in the privacy of their home, where she could explain or lie or cry, but in a space where the truth would be undeniable, where a facade would crack in public. He would use her own weapon, the unsent letter, and he would send it back, signed with his own epitaph for their relationship. He had the blueprint. He had the target. All he needed was the perfect moment, the stage upon which to deliver his quiet, devastating finale. And as fate would have it, Maya herself was about to hand him the perfect opportunity on a silver platter, a networking retreat that would provide the backdrop for a confrontation she would never see coming. The opportunity presented itself a week later, wrapped in the guise of mundane conversation. "There's a networking retreat," Maya said over dinner, not quite meeting his eyes. "In Santa Barbara. It's a big deal for firm. I leave Friday morning." Her words were practiced, smooth. She was a good liar. He had to give her that. The performance was flawless, complete with a sigh of reluctance that didn't reach her eyes. Evan took a sip of water, his own mask firmly in place. "That sounds great," he said, his voice even, supportive. "You should go. You've been working so hard." The lie passed between them, a ghost at the table, seen only by him. He felt a strange, detached power. He was no longer the victim of her deceit. He was the director of its final act. Friday morning, he helped her pack, his hands folding her clothes, the very clothes she would wear for him. He kissed her goodbye at the door, a dry, passionless brush of lips that felt like the ceiling of a tomb. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, the stillness in the house shifted. It was no longer a pause. It was an ending. By noon, he was a whirlwind of quiet efficiency. The last of his boxes were loaded into a rental van. The keys to the new apartment were heavy and cold in his pocket. Then he sat at his barren kitchen table, the folded letter before him. He unfolded it one last time, and with a steady hand, took a pen. Beneath her final, damning sentence, he wrote his own. "Thank you for showing me what honesty looks like in reverse. You're free now, and so am I." He found the hotel, the retreat location she had so carelessly mentioned. A courier was dispatched with precise instructions. Deliver the sealed envelope to Maya Brooks during the conference's main dinner. The cost was insignificant. It was the price of his freedom. That night, in a grand hotel ballroom buzzing with the clatter of cutlery and the hollow laughter of networking, Maya sat among her colleagues. Evan could picture it perfectly. The clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversation. A waiter, anonymous and efficient, would place a small, cream-colored envelope beside her plate. She would open it, her smile faltering as she recognized her own handwriting. He imagined the blood draining from her face, the slow-motion horror as her eyes found his words at the bottom. He imagined her world, her carefully constructed double life, folding it on itself in that very public, very bright room. She would excuse herself, a hand flying to her mouth, and rush out, the eyes of her colleagues, and likely Kay, boring into her back. The unraveling was complete. But as Evan sat in the profound silence of his new, empty apartment, a chilling question began to form in the stillness. What happens when the ghost you've unleashed finally returns home, seeking the man who is no longer there? The silence in his new apartment was a physical presence. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a sleeping house, but a deep, resonant void. There was no hum of Maya's laptop, no soft scent of her perfume lingering in the air, no distant sound of television from the other room. It was just space, raw, unfurnished, and his, for the first 24 hours. He did nothing but exist within it. He didn't turn on the lights as dusk fell. He just sat on the floor, leaning against the bare wall, and let the tidal wave of everything he had held back finally crash over him. The grief for his mother, the searing pain of betrayal, the terrifying thrill of his own cold execution. It all mingled together in the dark, and he wept until he was hollowed out. But as the sun rose the next morning, casting long, unfamiliar shadows across the hardwood floor, Something else began to stir in that hollowed space. It was a faint, almost forgotten impulse. He walked to a single box marked Office and pulled out his old, reliable laptop. He set it on the floor, plugged it in, and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked, a steady, patient metronome in the quiet. For months, his creativity had been a barren field, frozen by grief. Now the ice was cracking. His fingers found the keys. He began to write, not about wizards or spies, the subject of his previous books, but about a man who found a letter. He titled the document, The Letter She Never Sent. The story began, sometimes the truest words are the ones never spoken. They are the ghosts that haunt the spaces between the spoken lies, the perfect, pristine truth of a betrayal that never had to voice itself to become real. The words poured out of him, a cathartic exorcism. He was no longer Evan Brooks, the grieving son, the betrayed boyfriend. He was Evan Brooks, the author, the architect of his own narrative. He was transforming the poison into ink. He knew Maya would have returned to her house by now. He could imagine her walking into the void he had left behind. The missing books, the empty spaces in the closet, the chilling neutrality of a home stripped of his presence. His phone had remained stubbornly silent. He had blocked her number after the courier confirmation came through. He didn't need to hear her explanations or her anger. The letter had said it all. His silence was his answer. He was building a new world from the rubble of the old, word by painful, liberating word. But he had underestimated the persistence of a ghost from his past, and the first crack in his newfound peace would come not as a shout, but as a whisper on his unblocked landline, a trembling voice from a number he still recognized, breaking the silence he had fought so hard to create. The landline rang, a jarring, archaic sound in the modern quiet of his apartment. He'd kept it for his publisher and emergency contacts, a number Maya had never bothered to memorize. He saw the area code, and his blood ran cold. It was her. She had found a way through. He let it ring 4 times, the sound clawing at the walls of his new sanctuary. On the 5th ring, a part of him, the part that needed to prove he was no longer hiding, made him pick it up. Evan. Her voice was a shattered thing, stripped of all its former confidence. It was raw from crying, small and terrified. He said nothing. The silence on his end was a weapon he had mastered. I got your note, she stammered. I came home and you were gone. Everything is gone. A sob escaped her, harsh and ugly. Evan, I am so sorry. It wasn't what you think. It was just emails, just talking. I was lonely. You were so distant after your mom. It was a mistake. Please, can we just talk? Can you please come home? He listened to the entire fractured confession. He heard the excuses woven into the apology, the subtle shifting of blame onto his grief. And he felt nothing. No rage, no vindication, not even pity. Just a vast, calm emptiness where his love for her used to be. When she finally trailed off, her breath hitching, he spoke. His voice was soft, but it was not gentle. It was final. You don't owe me an explanation, Maya, he said, each word measured and clean. You already wrote it. The silence on her end was absolute. He had given her her own words back, once again, and this time there was no audience, no performance. There was only the truth, naked and undeniable. Goodbye, Maya, he said and ended the call. He didn't slam the phone down. He simply pressed a button and placed the receiver back in its cradle. The action felt like the last period on the final sentence of a very long, very difficult chapter. He felt a surge of something pure and light. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was peace. Months drifted by, marked by the growing word count of his manuscript. The book, The Letter She Never Sent, was finished, a raw, emotional novel that his publisher hailed as his brilliant return. At the launch party, surrounded by the murmur of admirers and the clink of wine glasses, he felt a calm he hadn't known in years. And then he saw her, Isla, a historian who had written a book on forgotten love letters. Their eyes met across the room, and she offered a small, knowing smile. They talked for an hour beneath the soft, warm lights. And for the first time, the conversation wasn't a minefield. It was just a conversation. He realized with a jolt of clarity that he was no longer carrying the weight of Maya, or the letter, or the betrayal. The artifact that had once shattered him had become the cornerstone of his freedom. But as he laughed at something Isla said, a part of him wondered if this new, fragile connection could truly be built upon the ruins of the old, or the ghost of Maya's letter would forever cast a shadow over his chance to love again. Evan and Isla's story unfolded not with the frantic, dramatic passion he'd once had with Maya, but with a slow, steady warmth, like the dawn after a long night. They wrote together in quiet cafes, their laptops open like shared secrets. They walked through the city, and he found himself pointing out details he'd forgotten existed. The way the light hit an old brick wall, the sound of a particular street musician's violin. Isla had a quiet gravity, a kindness that felt solid and real. She didn't try to fill his silences. She simply shared them. One afternoon, months into their relationship, they were in his apartment. The sun was setting, painting the room in hues of orange and gold. Isla was browsing his bookshelf, her fingers trailing over the spines. She paused, her hand resting on a single cream-colored journal he'd kept from his old life. It was the one he'd found Maya's letter in. He'd held on to it, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of the line he had crossed, from victim to survivor. "Is this?" Isla asked softly, her intuition startling him. She had read his book, of course. She knew the story, though she never pressed for details. He nodded, his throat tight. "It is." She didn't open it. She simply looked at him, her gaze clear and understanding. "You don't have to keep it, you know," she said. "You've already written the better story." Her words unlocked something deep inside him. He walked over, took the journal from the shelf, and held its weight in his hands. It wasn't a symbol of pain anymore. It was just a book, a closed chapter. He walked to the small fireplace he never used, knelt down, and placed the journal inside. He struck a match. The flame caught the edge of the paper, curling it black, consuming the elegant script, the lies, the memory of that particular hurt. He watched it burn until it was nothing but ash. He stood and turned back to Isla. She was watching him, her expression filled not with pity, but with profound respect. In that moment, Evan Brooks felt the last of the ghost dissolve. Maya's letter had spoken of remembering a forgotten color. He finally understood. It wasn't about finding a new person to make you feel alive. It was about rediscovering the color within yourself. The betrayal hadn't broken him. It had broken him open, and from those cracks, a stronger, truer version of himself had finally emerged, ready to build a future not on the ruins of the past, but on the solid, hopeful ground of the present. The story was over. His life, at last, was just beginning.